And I completely reject the premise of the question.
Yes.
I don't believe in guilty pleasures.
What do you think we're going to judge you for? Hello, and welcome to a special experimental edition of Beneath the Page, the podcast about books and the writers behind them. I'm Sophie Beal.
And I'm Steve Couch.
And by experimental, we mean you're not going to see this if it doesn't work. Steve and I would like to try a new format. The working title at the moment is Books Beside My Bed. What we think is that we will get to know more about people by not just what they write, but the books that they read. So, Steve, what kind of reader are you?
I've always been a hugely enthusiastic reader. Right from when I was a kid, I read lots. I'm quite a fast reader, and I like to think I'm quite an eclectic reader. I don't just stick to one or two narrow genres. I try and read. I read some highbrow literary fiction. I read a lot of lowbrow commercial fiction. I just enjoy reading, and I enjoy a good story. Even though there's been a lot of books that I've read since we started doing this podcast, which I probably wouldn't have picked up were it not for this podcast, and have thoroughly enjoyed.
Brilliant. So, the first question, you gave me this list of questions. Your favourite comfort read?
For a long time, I think my answer to that would have been Lord of the Rings, which
Comfort
I read.
read.
Well, as in it's a book that I go back to again and again.
Okay,
and,
all right.
and
I'm not judging.
greet it like an old friend.
I just think it's exhausting. There's 3 books long.
Oh, but it's wonderful. That said, it's been overtaken for my go-to something familiar, something that I already know, something that I know I'm going to enjoy. Probably by Christopher Brookmyre, who is a crime writer. He's Glaswegian. I lived in Scotland for a few years, and the Glaswegian sensibility really comes out in his book, if you know it. His books, I should say.
I'm nodding because I know about Glaswegian sensibility, not that I've read the book.
Brookmyre has a wonderfully dark Glaswegian sense of humour. He writes brilliantly plotted, twisty crime thrillers. He's written a couple of dozen books now, and I've read all of them. And actually, if I just want something familiar, very often he's who I'll go back to. Be My Enemy is one that I particularly enjoy. The Sacred Art of Stealing is another excellent one to start. And I'm actually reading a brand new Brookmyre right now, which I've just started in the last couple of days, The Cracked Mirror, which, bearing in mind I'm not that far into it, you've got a Miss Marple-like detective figure, little old lady investigating a murder in her quiet Scottish town. You've also got a hard-boiled LA detective investigating a murder in LA. And this is what I know from the blurb. It turns out that it's one case that can't possibly be one case. So you've got 2 separate strands of the book written in 2 completely different styles of literary genre, and they're going to come together. And yeah, it's a fascinating concept, and I'm loving it.
And just wondering how they're going to come together.
Yeah, I've got no idea how it's going to come together. Even to the point of the chapters are not numbered chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's chapter 1, 2, 3. Then it switches to chapter 1 of the other story, chapter 2. Then it's back to chapter 4 of the first story. Then chapter 3. And
yes.
It's
so
really
they are
interesting.
linked, but who knows how?
Yes.
Except for, well, I suppose Chris Brookmyre knows.
But I've gone off topic there because that's not a familiar book. That's a brand new one. But Christopher Brookmyre would be my go-to comfort read.
Okay, the book that surprised you.
When I was thinking of my answer to this, I've made a policy decision not to include any of the books that we've had to read for this podcast. So the book that surprised me, I'm going to pick a book called The Declaration of the Rights of Magicians by H.G. Parry. And it's a book that I saw in a bookshop, having never heard of it, and took a punt on it. And I didn't realise I was going to love it as much as I did. It's got a Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell vibe to it, in that it's historical fiction with a fantasy element. It's set at the time of the French Revolution, but as well as all the social upheaval and the quest for the battle for the abolition of slavery and things like that was going on. there's also a campaign for the rights of commoners to be allowed to use magic like the aristocracy are allowed to. Pitt the Younger and William Wilberforce are main characters in the book, and the relationship between the two of them is just beautifully observed.
Yes.
Really lovely relationship. But it's this wonderful, intricate fantasy historical story. I can't remember enjoying a book more on first reading for years. And it got to the end and I was livid because the way it ended was so unsatisfying. But once I knew there was a second book, then my only objection was gone. And H.G. Parry has become one of my favourite writers now. And it was just a punt that I saw in a bookshop and thought, I'll give that a go.
At a tangent.
Yes.
I know you prefer physical books.
Yes.
But you also read a lot.
Yes.
And you take a punt on things. What do you do with all the books that you've bought?
To the great pleasure of my wife, I keep them.
Really?
Oh, yes. We have many, many books at home. I can't bear parting with books. Because you never know when you're going to want to read one again.
The book that's not for everybody, but which you love.
As you know, Sophie, I'm a big football fan. And I read a lot of books about football. And one of my favourites, which I do reread from time to time, is a book called Inverting the Pyramid, A History of Football Tactics. But this book takes us from the early days of football when the tactics basically were one person gets the ball and runs as far as he can and all his teammates try and stay near him because then when he gets tackled, the ball might break to them and they can run on as far, to the addition of passing the ball, which was considered an unmanly thing to do in the early days of football. But then the gradual progression of tactics, and it's fascinating. I tend not to go for the standard ex-player or even current player autobiography, but there's lots of great football books that I read. And
have you read Lynn Truss's football one?
I've not. I have read Eats, Shoots and Leaves, and I'm aware of her work before that as a football reporter. But no, I've not read her football book.
I haven't either. I just wondered if you had.
I was going to say, if you had, you could have claimed you'd read a football book that I haven't.
No. Right, the next one, the book that's a guilty pleasure, which means something that other people might look down on, but you want to enthuse about.
I wrote that question and I completely reject the premise of the question.
Yes.
I don't believe in guilty pleasures. If you enjoy a book or a film or a piece of music or whatever, then you enjoy it and you don't need to feel guilty. But
what do you think we're going to judge you for?
I'm going to pick an author who is brilliant, and many, many people are convinced of his brilliance, and many other people are sneery and dismissive and can't concede that he has literary merit. Terry Pratchett.
I knew you were going to say that. Yes.
His Discworld series is wonderful.
Really good.
Hugely funny, but there's so much depth and thought, and so much of what we look to in serious literature is in there. Pratchett fans will all have their different favourite series within the series. My favourite is the ones concerning the Guard, the Ankh-Morpork Watch, and Sam Vimes, the head of the watch, is such a wonderful character. I would put him alongside Sam Gamgee from Lord of the Rings as possibly my favourite character in literature, and he's another Sam, bizarrely.
Yes.
Too many people see the cartoony covers and the fact that it's fantasy
and funny,
and just assume that it's trite, shallow silliness, which
it isn't.
I get
really annoyed when people do that.
Yes.
When people write things off just because they're pleasurable.
I don't see it as a guilty pleasure, but I'm aware that there are a lot of people who would dismiss.
I didn't know
Pratchett.
that. I've only ever known people who go on about how great Terry Pratchett is. I've never come across any haters.
Oh, okay. Well, I
You
have.
You have. Oh, that's interesting. Right. So the book you would most like to have a long conversation with the author about?
In the end, I've settled on Girlfriend in a Coma, but I'd really just like to have a long conversation with the author, Douglas Coupland.
Oh, he wrote Gen X as well.
Generation X.
Eleanor Rigby and...
Yes.
Not sure. Did he name Generation
I
X?
think he did. I wouldn't want to...
I think think he did.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to swear to that, but I think he did.
Yes.
When I was a youth worker in the 1990s, people were talking about Generation X. And so I read them as part of I'm wanting to understand how young people at that time were different from young people when I was a young person.
Actually, I don't know. Are you Generation X?
I think technically I do pin to Generation X. But even so, that's why I started reading him. His early books are fascinating on that angle. And then as he's gone on as a writer, he's just become a really good, more traditional novelist. But Girlfriend in a Coma is the most extraordinary book. There's a level of magical realism in a lot of his writing, and I think that's certainly the case in that one. I was working for a church as a youth worker. It read to me like an evangelistic call to people from a secular perspective, or from a non-religious perspective, not necessarily an anti-religious, but it was a real, this is what life's about, and people need to wake up and be aware of that. And once you're aware of what life's about, it changes everything about how you live. And he's someone who isn't coming from a place of faith, as far as I'm aware. How much of the time he spent on that kind of issue, or just talking more broadly, he strikes me as such a individual and distinctive thinker that I'd love to have a long conversation and pick his brains.
The books you loved as a child.
I had all of the Famous Five books.
Yep.
And I was a member of the Famous Five Club with a badge. I read loads and loads of the Target paperbacks that they brought out, novelizations of Doctor Who stories. My friend Stuart had a vast collection of them, and I borrowed probably most of, if not all of those, at one time or another. But the ones I want to talk about, possibly because they're a bit less familiar than those two, the Jennings books by Anthony Buckridge.
Yes. I tried to get them to read that at school, and now I realise, because my mum had read it at home, and they were really reticent. And now I realise why. You don't want to read a book about posh boys to state
Posh
school
boys
children.
in boarding school,
Yes.
getting up to japes. The vision that stuck in my head was a time they were pretending there was a fire. I don't know if there was an actual fire drill, if the lads in the dorm had just decided to pretend there was a fire. And someone said, but there'd be lots of smoke if there was a fire, wouldn't there? And they went, yes, there would. And they said, but if there's smoke, if we crouch down low, that's where the air will be, the smoke will go up. So they crouched down low. Then they got wet flannels to put over their mouths. And then they're crawling around the room, pretending that it's full of smoke. And one of them said, but in the smoke, would we be able to see the door? So they crawled round and round, missing the door. For some reason, that's stayed in my mind.
I think the one I read most was Jennings and Derbyshire.
Derbyshire was my favourite.
Yes.
I've always been a fan of sidekicks.
Because that's the one they started printing press in, which is where with the letter E and they lose it. But the other bit was where they interviewed one of their teachers, and he wanted to go for a row in the morning, but they didn't. They weren't sure how to distinguish him from enjoying a row in the morning. These things stick in my mind.
But they were just gloriously funny books.
Funny.
I can remember being entertained by endlessly when I was little.
They remind me of William books. Have you come across William?
Yes, and they never appealed to me in the same way. Possibly because I was more of a well-behaved swot like Derbyshire rather than a rebellious scallywag like William.
I suppose I enjoyed them because they were at the stage I had baby brothers. So the book you wish you'd written.
I think I may have mentioned this already in the episode where you interviewed me about my books, but A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving.
Yes, you did.
When I finished it for the first time, the ending was so unexpected yet so completely prepared for. I just wanted to start reading again from the beginning so I could see all the clues that I hadn't picked up at the time.
I am going to have to read it. I've only seen the film, and I've got a feeling it's got nothing to do with it.
I was unaware of the film until we'd had this conversation last time. I think the film is sufficiently different that John Irving was very happy for them to give it a different title because he felt it wasn't his story anymore. But yeah, A Prayer for Owen Meany is
I'll have to read it.
Is if I ever write anything as perfect as that, I will be exceptionally proud.
The book that makes you laugh.
Again, I'm going to go for a series of books. They are quite a niche genre. It's sort of like a Maltese Falcon style noir detective thriller. but set in a fictionalised version of Aberystwyth. They're by Malcolm Price, and they've got wonderful titles. The first one is Aberystwyth Mon Amour. There's also Last Tango in Aberystwyth, From Aberystwyth with Love, The Unbearable Lightness of Being in Aberystwyth, and so on. It's this Aberystwyth local private detective, Louis Knight. The cases he investigates brings him in contact with the gang who runs things in Aberystwyth, who are the Druids. He has a friend who is a existentialist, philosophizing ice cream salesman. One of the rackets in the town is wrapped up in the sales of seaside rock. It's wonderfully silly and funny, but setting all that in the context of a noir detective thriller, but really good stories. There's moments that are laugh out loud funny.
Yes.
I will be honest, the most recent one I was a bit disappointed by, but the first, I think, 5 books, all of them are entertaining and funny and inventive.
The book that makes you think.
This goes back to, I think, a book I first read when I was a teenager. I read a lot of C.S. Lewis at that time, as well as the Narnia books and his science fiction trilogy and a lot of his essays. But the one that really stayed with me is a book called Till We Have Faces, which is his retelling of the Cupid and Psyche myth from Greek mythology, where he tells it from the perspective of Psyche's older sister. And in his version of the story, she, compared to her sister, is not a beauty and is not adored and admired, but actually grows up to be a wise and successful ruler of their nation and one who steers them through times of war and difficult times. She feels hugely angry against the gods and resolves to stand face to face with them and confront them on all that's wrong with the world and all that's wrong, all that's unfair for her and the people around her. As she goes on through the book, that journey that she undertakes to go to where the gods can be met with, she comes to realise that actually she did not have the perspective to stand face to face with the gods. The title comes from a point in the book where she realises she's not grown enough or understood enough for her challenge to them to have merit. You know, how can we stand face to face with the gods till we have faces? Which is very a C.S. Lewis take on that kind of thing, but it's a wonderful, profound, thoughtful book.
The book that takes you back.
I am going to say a set of books. I seem to be doing that a lot. You asked me the book, and I'm answering multiple. But I can point to a particular one in this series. A set of books that I can remember reading with my eldest son Peter when he was little. They're by an author called Andy Stanton, and the series is the Mr. Gum series. The first one is You're a Bad Man, Mr. Gum. They're just the most wonderfully bizarre, hilariously funny books with glorious cartoon-like characters, but the humour that underpins it all is so funny. There was one book, which I think was What's for Dinner, Mr. Gum. I couldn't finish reading the bit I was reading because both of us were laughing so hard. I literally would start reading it and have to give up and try again and try again. And Peter then took the book into school and got his teacher to read that bit to the class, and she had the same problem. But it's such a lovely memory of that time with me and Peter and that stage of life. Yeah, the Mr. Gum books by Andy Stanton.
The book not enough people know about, in your opinion.
I am actually going to put a book that a friend of mine has written, though not someone that we've had on. A former colleague of mine, who I know as Sophie, but who the literary world knows as S.E. Lister. One of her books is called The Immortals, and I was just bowled away by it. If it was by anybody, I would want to read it. The main character is a young woman who grew up in a family of time travellers, only her family relived 1945 over and over and over again. Her dad takes the family back to early 1945, and they live through 1945 again, and then he takes them back.
Oh no.
And they eventually she escapes this and discovers the ability to slip through time herself, and discovers there's a whole host of people who have this ability, who flip through the years and go from place to place, not always, in fact not generally, being in control of where they go. It's a great concept, but what Sophie does with it is so good, and the end I felt was something really quite profound. And I would say that if she wasn't someone who
Which
I
is
used
always
to work with.
which is always the test, isn't
Yes.
it?
And we're friends on Facebook now, but we don't
Yeah.
really have any contact with each other. So she's a lapsed friend rather than a not a friend
Lapsed
anymore.
friend. That sounds awful.
You know what I mean, though.
I
She's
do. I always think people are still friends. It's
Yes.
just that you haven't spoken to.
yes, that's what I mean. But
Yes.
but it's not like it's one of my best buddies or anything.
Yes.
Sorry, Sophie, if you're listening to this. You're great.
The author whose books you'll always read, even without knowing anything about the story.
I have a few. Some of them I've already mentioned. We've not mentioned them yet today, but Nick Hornby, we have talked about before. Chris Brookmeyer,
Yes.
we've talked about. H.G. Parry is the most recent addition to that list. Kate Atkinson is...
Oh, yes, yes.
I've read a few of her
She's
books.
really good. Well, the ones I've read are really
Yes, and Ian McEwan.
good. Oh, yes. Actually,
I-
he would be on mine. Yes.
Yeah, mostly I'm driven by plot and character and concept. He's one of the few writers who I just adore reading his prose.
Yes, it's so straightforward.
It's
so...
Beautiful.
It slips down so
Yes.
beautifully because he's worked so hard on making it simple.
But there's a stylishness, there's a quality. It sings off the page when he combines that with getting the plot absolutely
Yes.
right. Atonement is
Yeah,
one
I was
of my
gonna say
favourite
Atonement,
books.
yes.
So yeah, Ian
Yeah.
McEwan. I would read everything he writes.
Oh, I've lost my place now. Your literary twin.
As we've talked about before, Nick Hornby. I remember when Fever Pitch, his memoir as a football fan, came out. I read it and I loved it. Then High Fidelity came out, and adding to football and neurotic maleness, he was adding music fan and neurotic maleness. And I remember at the time friends
"This is
saying to
me."
me, he's basically you, Steve.
Yes.
You are another version of Nick Hornby. And we subsequently discovered, or I subsequently discovered, we share a birthday.
Yeah.
So we are kind of twins, albeit twins with about 10 or so years age difference.
Which one of you's older?
He is.
Oh, right. Because he's
think.
bald, isn't he? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to age him on his
Yes.
on his author photo.
At the recent Bournemouth Writing Festival in the Author Marketplace, someone who'd bought Dead Man Singing previously came up to me and said, one, how much she'd enjoyed it, which was lovely, and two, she was there to buy Foul and Fair, which was lovely again. But she also said how much Dead Man Singing had reminded her of Nick Hornby, which is just about the highest praise I think anyone could have given me.
Especially when it isn't prompted.
Yes.
And it isn't from one of your best friends.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It was someone who didn't know me, who'd read my book and
It's
and
wonderful, actually.
came out of her way to find me because she knew I was there to say that. If you get to see this, Sally, thank you very much.
So
about
well
that.
done, Sally. You said the right thing. The last great book you read,
When we did your one, you
Yes.
ducked this question because you didn't want to.
compare
The
War and
definition
Peace
of
with
great
Moby Dick.
with
Not
this.
that I've read Moby Dick, but I imagine it's nothing like it.
I struggled with this partly because I was tying myself in knots as what I meant by a great book. I decided I would take the last great book to be the last book I read that I could see including in the list like this
Yes.
in several years' time.
Yes.
And it's another H.G. Parry one. I don't read a lot of fantasy now, and she's forced me to start reading more fantasy.
Yes.
The most recent book of hers that really grabbed me is a book called The Unlikely Escape of Uriah Heep.
Of David Copperfield.
One of the main characters is a professor of literature in New Zealand, as H.G. Parry is. This character has the ability, when reading a book, to bring characters from the book to life. He discovers that somebody else seems to have that ability, and there are characters from literature breaking into the real world all over the place, and he gets drawn into trying to solve the problems. And actually the main character is, I think, his brother who doesn't entirely understand what's going on. At one point, you have countless Mr. Darcys from Pride and Prejudice, who are all different readers' imaginings of
Yes.
Mr. Darcy.
That's
Yes.
very good.
I think you see where the author is going to do the last twist, and I thought, oh, it's going to end. It's going to go like that. That's where it's ending, and I'd have been quite happy with that as an end. And then she pulls another twist out from under me. She goes somewhere beyond that. That was even better than the one I had foretold.
This is a bit like students taking the test, writing the question. But anyway, the book that isn't a book.
Yes. My thinking for this was we don't just consume books. There's lots of types of media and art and culture that we consume and which moves us and has the same effect on us as a book. For me, music is a big thing, as you know. I'm going to go for a song by my favourite Richard Thompson called Beeswing, which is the most beautifully constructed novel in song form. It's very much a folk ballad style song. The singer is remembering a relationship with a free-spirited woman who refuses to be tied down. The chorus, she was a rare thing, fine as a bee's wing, so fine a breath of wind might blow her away. She was a lost child, sure she was running wild. She said, as long as there's no price on love, I'll stay, and you wouldn't want me any other way. And that refrain comes back several times. And you hear the story of their relationship and of how he lost her by trying to tie her down, and then hearing of what became of her. And there's a whole lifetime told in this few minutes of song. I'm a massive Richard Thompson fan. He has never written a finer song. Yeah, Beeswing by Richard Thompson.
So the book you want to read, you haven't read, but you don't know why.
I almost didn't include this one because I thought it might look like I'm trying to show off, which I'm not.
But it's all about what you haven't read.
Yes, it's The Idiot by Dostoevsky.
Oh, yes.
I read Crime and Punishment and loved it. I started to read The Idiot and was really enjoying it. And I lost momentum. At the time, I hadn't learnt that it doesn't work for me to read more than one book at a time. And I was reading other things and I lost momentum. And when I came back, I couldn't, with all the long Russian names, I couldn't remember who all the characters were. And I couldn't bear to start again and go over what I'd already done. And I feel it's my loss. And I've also never read any more Dostoevsky since.
The book that doesn't fit any of the above categories, but you want to share with us anyway.
You're going to be annoyed with me again on this one because it's non-fiction. It is...
Only because I wish I'd known that was part of the rules.
It's a book by the comedian Stuart Lee called How I Escaped My Certain Fate, The Life and Deaths of a Stand-Up Comic. There's sections where he writes kind of autobiographical how he got to this part. But the bulk of the book is the annotated script of 3 separate stand-up shows that he did. What is fascinating about it is you've got what he said in the show and lengthy footnotes where he talks about what he was doing and why he was doing it. And
that sounds really
it's
interesting.
Brilliant.
I love seeing behind the scenes. I mean, it's very much like what we do here.
Yes.
But I love looking underneath the bonnet things.
He mocks himself
Yeah.
these days for being someone who people hold up as a higher form of comedy. And
You mean not funny?
Well, no, he's hilariously funny, but not intellectual in the sense of it's off-putting. But there's a lot of intellectual work going on in a Stuart Lee routine. And this gives you an insight into how he came to that style and how he goes about putting it together and what he's trying to accomplish. I loved it and feel I need to reread it again soon because putting this list together has reminded me of it.
Yes. Foul and Fair.
Yes.
Or Dead Man Singing. If you could only take one out of Burning Building, which would it be?
We framed this question when we were writing it as or put another way, who's your favourite child? And any parent will know you can't answer
You're not
that.
allowed to anyway.
I'm hugely proud of my next book that isn't out yet, Imogen Imagine. It goes to places the other two haven't, but I am always going to have a huge soft spot for Dead Man Singing because it was the first book that I had published. It was the one that opened the door for me to then write other books and have them published.
So it's the one of your children that's made you most proud.
Being the first, Dead Man Singing will have something that none of the others can ever have because it made the others possible. I think that worked quite well as an experiment, Sophie.
I was really impressed, actually. I wasn't completely convinced.
No,
I
you
did
weren't.
go along with it to humour you, but you were actually right. Well, maybe we're delusional, but I was quite pleased with how that went.
The viewers will be, or the listeners will be the
judges
of that. But please do let us know what you think in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more of us talking with other authors about books, do like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is your platform asks you to do, and then you'll get more of this sent your way.
See you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.